Hi, friends. This is Caroline of Carousel, and welcome. Today, I'd like to start with a quote, and then a story, and then maybe another story. So, the first is to choose passivity without power is to choose cowardice, or is to be a coward. This is an old Buddhist quote that says something to the effect of, I don't have the exact words in front of me, but it's always stuck with me, is to be a pacifist without any power is to be a coward. So I learned this quote when I was reading The Wheels of Light, which is the chakra textbook. Basically, my chakra textbook that I use is, and she's talking about the root chakra and how so many of us are taught to deny our own personal power. So, especially in Western cultures, we're taught that power is dominance, it's aggression, these ego based power aspects are what power are. And so, those of us that either have been victims of abuse or are afraid to become an abuser ourselves, we tend to deny our own power for fear that we will become the abuser of which we associate having power with. So we associate those that have power is inherent with an abuse of power. So if you have no power and you are also choosing to do nothing, it doesn't mean you are a pacifist. It means you are in this quote, it means you are a coward. It means you have no bravery or strength, or you're not choosing something. You're not choosing to be a pacifist out of honor. You're choosing to be a pacifist because you have no means to do anything else. You don't have the power to be anything else. So it's important, our personal power, that ownership of self, that honoring of ourself, the personal power of I deserve here, I have a right to exist, I have a right to be safe, I am, is very strong and very effective, and yet we have continued to push it away, and society and our culture has conditioned us to think that we have no power. We are a drop in a bucket. This is why environmental issues, social issues are portrayed to us in such a magnitude that we can't do anything. It's designed to make you feel overwhelmed, so you feel that you have no power to make a change, when in reality, you shifting your world, you making a change in your own world, will ripple out and positively affect everyone around you. So this leads into this story also about Buddhist monks. This is about 4,000 years ago. So the scene is set 4,000 years ago in the like South Asian countries. This is pre the borders were created, but you can think of the Indian Himalayan area. So these early monks, nomadic monks, were traveling in spiritual pursuit, living in one with nature, and they were pacifists because they are Buddhist monks, pacifists, traveling. And so, obviously, as pacifists, they cannot harm another being. But as these nomadic monks were traveling around, they were getting attacked. They were getting murdered and burglarized by vagabonds, by bandits, banditos. And so they decided they needed a system where they could still honor their pacifist vows and protect themselves. And so this is the legend of the roots of martial arts like jujitsu. So they say jujitsu came from the pacifist monks that needed a system to honor their pacifist vows while defending themselves. So they could neutralize their opponents, neutralize those that would cause them harm, but not in turn cause or inflict harm, unnecessary harm. So this was a self-defense system, not a warring system. And I love that because that's how I think of martial arts for me as a person. And even to this day, the arts that I use, the ability that I have, isn't as a it is not a warring pursuit. It is not to create conflict, but it is to honor and defend myself if that time comes. Because to choose to be passive without power, to choose to allow something to happen because you don't have the power to fix it, is to choose cowardice. So to choosing not to fight or not to be in any fights because you don't know how to fight is not is not a strength. That's not a virtue. That's not you choosing to be brave. You having the ability to choke somebody to death and choosing not to that is power. That is a different type of power. That is a different type of self-mastery versus not knowing how to defend yourself at all, and so you choose not to. It's not the same thing. So this is such an important, to me, the physical manifestations in which we can represent our power, or the behaviors we engage in, the skills we acquire, the things we learn, the activities and teachings that we put values on, reveals where we are with ourselves. So my personal belief, as the guidance keeps pushing me to explain and teach, that self-sufficiency is so important. It has to do with sovereignty. The more self-sufficient we are, the more sovereign we are. My personal opinion is that martial art, or having a self-defense, or having a martial art, is part of that equation. So if you don't have a physical way to feel self-sufficient in your personal or physical safety, you're not choosing to be passive. You're not choosing to be peace and love and da da da. No, you don't have the power to make another option. So you're not choosing that from a place of empowerment or strength. You're choosing that because you don't have the ability to do anything else. So and this is more important. You show up differently in the world when you have the ability to enforce or maintain your personal boundaries and your physical safety. So and this is what I was explaining to some students over the weekend, was you will show up differently. If you're in a situation and you feel like it's going to get ugly, you will respond before anything even happens differently if you know you can back it up. You will say no earlier on. You will put yourself out of situations. You won't be passive and allow yourself to get pulled along because you know you can get yourself out of that situation. Versus if you're in a situation, there's nobody to help you, and you feel like you don't have the answers, you don't know what you would do if things escalated, you might allow things to go further than they should because you don't have the answers, because you don't have the ability, you don't have the power to back it up. So choosing passivity at that point when you don't have that power is cowardice. You don't have anything else. You don't have another answer. You don't have another option. You haven't taught yourself. You haven't taken that on as a value. You haven't pursued that as a reality. So the way that guidance gave this to me, again, in another way, is, for example, the difference between an elephant and an antelope. Both are technically prey species. I mean, they're both herbivores. They don't eat other animals. So they're both technically prey species. But a lion or any other predator species doesn't fuck with an elephant unless it's unhealthy or it can't defend itself due to age. So another health condition. So elephants they eat vegetation. They don't eat animals. They're very, what you would consider is mild, unless they need to defend themselves, and then they're not passive. So an elephant not inflicting pain or abusing other animals because they have the power to do it if they want to, but they choose not to. So that's an elephant. They're choosing passivity because they have the power to defend themselves when they need to, if and when they need to. Versus an antelope doesn't have the skill set, it doesn't have the growth, the horns, it doesn't have the ability, the tools to defend itself if it needs to. An antelope has two options: to get eaten or to run. That's it. It doesn't have the power to choose passivity because it's not choosing passivity because it has power not to. Its only choice is passivity and running because it's the only thing it has. So are you an elephant or an antelope? Both are peaceful species. Both are kind animals. Both are technically prey species. They eat vegetation. They don't pursue or negatively impact other creatures. but they're two very different things. And so it's you don't have to be a predator or a prey, but you also don't have to be a coward by making yourself an easy target. Does that make sense? And I'm not saying this because, oh my God, everyone needs to learn self-defense because you need to defend yourself. But no, you will show up in situations differently. You will tolerate less abuse knowing you have a way to defend yourself. Think about if you, okay, so if you, let's say you have money in the bank, you have a whole bunch of savings, and you're looking for a job, but you've got savings through like the year, so you know you're cool and you have time to make another to find the job that you want. And let's say somebody offers you a shitty job, something super shitty, something that you have no interest doing, and you're like, no way could I spend my time doing that. Like, I would be miserable. If you have power, as in what we're talking about in this example, is you have that monetary power where you have that leverage, that time to be able to say no and search for a job, you'll say no because you don't need to. You don't need to suffer. You have the power and the ability to not be passive in this choice in your life. Versus if you have no money in the bank, you have none of that power, you have none of that leverage, and someone offers you a shitty job and you have no other options, or you can't see, you don't see any other viable options, you probably will accept that job out of fear, out of passivity, out of being afraid. So this is why it's so important to own our personal power, and that means our aggression. That means our fire. That means our passions. That means our ideas of dominance and the power structures that we find ourselves in. That means leadership. That means personal power. Like, we need to be able to harness those things. If you are afraid of owning your personal power, that is not strength. That is fear. That is not you. Oh, no. I'm okay. I don't need to. I'm fine sacrificing myself. I'm a martyr. No, that's not coming from a place of power. That's not because you are honoring yourself. That's not coming from a place of strength. That's you saying, like, yes, I could do this thing, but I'm choosing not to. Yes, I could beat the shit out of you right now, but I'm choosing not to. Not as in, oh no, I don't know how to defend myself, so you can keep doing whatever because I don't know how. Like, that's a totally different thing. So I don't know if that makes sense, but I keep trying. It's Mercury, or it's almost Mercury retrograde, and I'm such a Gemini. So please, thank you for your patience while I'm trying to put this out, because it's the third time I've tried this to put this together in this way, and I still don't know if it's coming out in a logical way that makes sense. But so it's so important, the concept of choosing passivity without power is cowardice or fear, because you're afraid. You're choosing passivity because you're afraid, not because you are doing it from an empowered place. You don't have another option if you don't create another option. Choosing to be passive when you have the power is really choosing passivity. That's not your default. You're not doing that because you have no option. Like, no, you have the option to enact or to use your other power skill sets, and you're choosing not to, choosing to be passive. So all of us being passive in the world is, imagine if you, let me think about this. For us to have a healthy and empowered society, people need to, on an individual microcosm level, need to know how to maintain and enforce and honor their own physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, financial, relational boundaries. If you are not owning your power to protect yourself in these realms and all of the different ways that is, whether it's setting a verbal boundary, or you have to set a physical boundary, or a relational boundary, or a financial boundary with yourself or your loved ones, or whatever. If you don't have the power to protect those things, choosing to be passive about what happens is not an empowered place to be. That is not coming from your power, because you are afraid to own your power and choose what feels right. You are not making an empowered decision if you are rejecting your power, rejecting your strength, rejecting your personal power, and choosing to be passive. So be like a monk, like a nomadic monk, and find a way to honor yourself. The fact that you can still, this is another example I wanted to give. My partner and I were at a grocery store one time, and we were both wearing jujitsu stuff. And she goes, "Oh my gosh, do you guys do jujitsu?" And we're like, "Yeah, of course. It's so fun, blah, blah, blah." And then she's like, "Oh, I could never do that because I'm too nice. I'm just too nice." And my ego response was like, "Do you think I'm not nice?" Like, because I do a martial art. And then the second thing is this is a perfect example of somebody choosing passivity and not owning their power. So me doing martial arts, me taking the action and the steps and owning my personal power to protect myself and maintain my sovereignty doesn't make me not nice. It makes me not a doormat. It makes me not an easy target. It makes me more powerful to enforce and maintain my boundaries and to feel empowered being passive. Because I know I can be passive up until the point where it doesn't honor me anymore. Versus what she's saying is, I'm too nice to do that. And so whether she meant it or not, what this implies is you feel that learning a way to maintain your boundaries, to say, no, this is not okay to treat me in this way, to say that I will defend myself, even in sparring, even when you're having fun, even when sparring, you have to learn not to accept positions. So jiu-jitsu is a ground grappling art. And sometimes, let's say you don't want to go to your back, but somebody sweeps you and they put you on your back. If you accept that position, now you're fighting off your back. Versus you have to learn to not accept the positions you don't want to be in. Like, for example, me being a blue belt, still I get paired with white belt men, which are dangerous because they use a lot of strength. And so for me to not be put into bad positions, I can't accept the positions they want to put me in. I have to fight for the position I want to be in, because otherwise I'm being passive and I'm not owning my power. And I'm coming from that place of like, oh, no, it's okay. No, it's not okay. I deserve to fight from where I want to fight. And so this is what she's saying is, I don't feel worthy of not accepting what other people have designed for me. I don't feel worthy of setting my own boundaries, of setting my own parameters. And so it's so important. This is why martial arts are so great, especially when you have live sparring. There's other martial arts that don't force you to do sparring, which I think is not as useful if you don't know how to use these in real combat situations, or to see the fact that fights don't always go the way you are. When you learn techniques, you're learning a snapshot of a fight, and somehow getting to that point doesn't always look the way the setup is. You have to be adaptable. You have to be fluid. Like Bruce Lee, you have to be water, my friend. But it's true. And so when she said, I'm too nice to do that, it's she's saying that I'm a doormat. I'm a pushover. I'm too boundaryless to learn a method to maintain my boundaries. And so that is a perfect example of passivity without power is a form of cowardice or a form of fear, or what we can think of. And cowardice is maybe not the literal thing, but it is a choice in fear. As in, and like I mentioned in the last video, the things that you don't change, you're choosing. So if you don't change the ways that you feel unsafe in the world, if you don't change the ways that you feel unworthy, if you don't change these things that don't make you feel good, you're choosing to continue that experience. You're choosing to continue to not feel good or not feel the best you could. So by her saying, I'm too nice to do jujitsu or a martial art, she's saying, I'm choosing to be passive and not own my power, which is coming from a place of fear or a place of unworthiness or a place of lack. I'm not taking personal responsibility for my safety, my sovereignty. I am putting that responsibility on others. And then when other people choose to bypass my boundaries, I'm not responsible. It's someone else's fault for not keeping me safe. And that's unrealistic. It's your responsibility to feel safe, to feel empowered, to feel good, to walk around this earth as if you belong to be here, and as if your boundaries and your personal and physical safety is something to be respected. That's your responsibility. It's no one else's responsibility. I assume everybody will show up in that way because it's the proper way, but assholes exist. There are people that will try to take your free will, because those people exist. We still have a balance in the world of light and dark. So operating in my light is having a way to maintain my light. That is my power. I choose to be passive because I have the power to maintain my passivity, to maintain peace within myself and others. So it's important to know when the flow of, I don't know if that makes sense. It's important to find the right inputs of what your self-sovereignty looks like. And it may not be martial arts, but this may apply to another aspect of your life. But having a way to defend your physical safety, you will show up differently in all of these situations. I can promise you that. Whether it's fitness or you choose a martial art or blah, 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 but you will feel better setting a boundary or not being passive and allowing a situation get to a point that makes you uncomfortable. You will feel better about setting those boundaries earlier on because you know you have a power, you have a way to defend yourself, to stop it, to get out of that situation. Versus if you don't have an answer for that situation, you may allow it to go on a lot further than you would like or that you're comfortable with because you don't feel you have an answer, because you don't feel you have a method, you don't have a way to defend yourself or to get out of that situation. So you will show up differently. And also by having the practice of things like sparring, which desensitizes these things, you will be able to respond in a less heightened emotional state. You will be able to see things objectively instead of if you've had physical or sexual abuse, you may be responding without this opportunity to desensitize it. You may be responding from a place of your emotions, and it may be harder to understand logically and to perceive what is actually going on versus seeing it through the filter of your past traumas. And that's the other thing too, martial arts, especially things like jiu-jitsu, which are grappling and about everything's about touch. Such an important opportunity for someone that has experienced physical or sexual abuse to heal, because you learn safe touch. And not only that, but you have safe training partners. And so having a community with which you can desensitize touch and reclaim safe touch and connection with people that are in that same vibe, that are doing that same thing, that are rooting for you and support you, that is so healing. So healing. And it's one of the, oh, it scared me. I don't know if you can hear that. And it's one of the best things you can do for yourself. So by choosing to take on a martial art and heal those things, you are no longer choosing your in safety. You're no longer choosing your wounds, but you're actively being a participant in your healing. And that's the other thing too, is you learn safe touch. You have a community with which you can bond with. Usually, that's the thing, if you're going to pick a martial art, choose a place in which you feel safe, in which the training partners make you feel safe. That's the number one thing. Even if the teacher isn't the most world-renowned teacher or whatever, but if you feel safe and you're learning something positive and the techniques work, that's important. Your safety, you're going to get more out of it versus if you're in a situation where you don't feel safe. I've had, the majority of my training partners have been amazing, but I've had a handful where, not a handful, one or two, that it's not fun to train with those people, and that will not aid in your healing if you have experienced unsafe touching, either through physical or sexual abuse. So find somewhere you feel safe to train is the most important thing. So being passive without owning your power or without having the power to To not be passive is choosing your fear, is choosing your cowardice, is choosing your shame, is choosing your darkness, is choosing your whatever. So many of us are afraid to own our power because we have been abused by those that have had power, and we fear that by owning power, we will also become the abusers. That's not the case. And this is that's more of what this quote applies to, is having power and choosing passivity or choosing to be peaceful. That's what real power is. Having power and choosing to not abuse it is real power. Having power and choosing to abuse it is you're operating from your shadows, from your darkness, from your own wounds and your ego. So that isn't positive, that isn't of the light. But imagine owning your power, having real power, and then choosing to not abuse it. And not only are you being an example of that safety for yourself, but think of what you are displaying to your community, to your loved ones, to the people around you. Or if you're in an organization, think of what you're displaying to your coworkers, to your volunteers, your whatever. So own your power, my friends. And everything is a reflection of everything else. So what you do with your physical body, what you do with your physical safety will ripple into the other aspects of your life, and vice versa. What you do with your spiritual health and safety, what you do with your emotional health and safety, what you do with your financial health and safety, those things will ripple into the other aspects of your life. So pick one. But the physical safety, I think, is important. Because it's part of our base needs, and usually it's easier to build up from there than the top down. But once again, everyone has their own cryptex, everyone has their own code of what self-sovereignty and self-sufficiency looks like, and you have to find what that is for you. So are you an elephant or an antelope? Thank you, my friends, for sticking with me, and the Care Soul Divine Online memberships are here to support you. I look forward to being back with another video, another transmission with you, and your energy is safe with me. Enjoy your day, and I will be with you soon.